After Labour's landslide victory that ended 14 years of Tory rule, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced key policy decisions during his first press conference after chairing the cabinet meeting at number 10 Downing Street. Asserting that the work of change has begun, Starmer called the Rwanda plan dead and buried. The flagship scheme of the previous Conservative government aims to deport migrants to Rwanda.
Look, the Rwanda scheme was dead and buried before it started. It's never been a deterrent. Look at the numbers that have come over in the first 6 and a bit months of this year. They're record numbers. That is the problem that we are inheriting. It has never acted as a deterrent, almost the opposite, because everybody has worked out, particularly the gangs that run this, that the chance of ever going to Rwanda was so slim, less than 1%. That it was never a deterrent. The chances were of not going and not being processed and staying here, therefore, in paid-for accommodation for a very, very long time. It's had the complete opposite effect. And I'm not prepared to continue with gimmicks that don't act as a deterrent.
Former British Interior Minister Suella Braverman said millions of pounds had been spent on the scheme, while speculating that there are bigger problems in store for the new government.
Hundreds of excellent Tory MPs have been kicked out of office. We're now seeing Keir Starmer, install his government, scrap the Rwanda plan, for example. Years of hard work, acts of Parliament, millions of pounds been spent on a scheme which, had it been delivered properly, would have worked. But there are big problems on the horizon, which will be, I'm afraid, caused by Keir Starmer.
Starmer will visit the 4 UK nations before visiting Washington, D.C. for NATO summit. Early in the day, Starmer met his newly appointed ministers to discuss the government's first steps towards change. His top team includes Rachel Reeves as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Angela Rayner as Deputy Leader, and Yvette Cooper as Home Secretary. This marks Starmer's first full day as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Let's now take a look at the action plan by the new government. Starmer plans to stick to tough spending rules to deliver economic stability. The new government plans to set up a publicly owned clean power energy company called the Great British Energy. It wants to provide 40,000 more appointments each week to cut down his waiting lists. In order to tackle illegal migration, the new government plans to launch a border security command to stop the gangs arranging small boat crossings. It plans to induct more neighbourhood police officers to reduce antisocial behaviour. Hereon, new penalties are likely to be introduced for offenders. Coming to the education sector now, at least 6,500 teachers will be inducted for private schools. Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to his UK counterpart. He invited him to visit India after congratulating him on assuming charge. In a post on X, Modi says, and I quote, "Congratulated Starmer on being elected as Prime Minister of the UK. We remain committed to deepening comprehensive strategic partnership and robust economic ties for the progress and prosperity of our people and global good." End of quote. All right, let's talk more about the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Dr. Nigel Fletcher is a political analyst and commentator, is now joining us live from London. Dr. Fletcher, good to see you and welcome. The new Prime Minister is riding on a wave of vigour and change, and one of his first set of implementations as a leader of Great Britain is to overturn or even end some of the policies of former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Among them is killing the Rwanda asylum scheme. Your thoughts?
Yes, I think this was a flagship policy of the outgoing government that really marked a dividing point between them and Labour. And so it's no surprise that this is one of the first things to be ended by Keir Starmer. Although, as he says, it's something which Labour has been saying for many months and since the policy was first enacted, that it was not being successful in deterring migrants from crossing the Channel. And so there's no surprise that they are scrapping this scheme. I think the big question is whether their policy of a new sort of border security force will be enough to deter those crossings, because they still face the same problem. And if they're not going to use this policy, which they have ridiculed in the past for the Conservatives approaching it. What are Labour going to do to end them? And I think they will face that as a bit of a challenge over the summer. But that's not a great surprise that they're taking a different approach there. The title of the Labour Party's manifesto was Change, and that they're very keen to talk about that. And there's a lot of other policies that they are seeking to enact, and will probably much prefer to speak about those issues rather than have the kind of focus on Rwanda and that policy that the Conservatives had.
Dr. Fletcher, what do you think of the new cabinet setup? Who to you stands out and will indeed instill some needed changes in the United Kingdom?
Well, it is quite striking that Keir Starmer has appointed to office the same people who shadowed those roles in opposition. So they're people who we've expected to be appointed. There were some rumours in advance of the election that he might make some changes to that lineup, but he's actually gone with quite a predictable number of cabinet members. There were some notable figures there. Rachel Reeves, the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, is the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain, and that's a notable point. But I think more importantly, she's somebody who has got a huge focus on maintaining Labour's fiscal discipline and their economic credibility. She's going to be, with Keir Starmer, keeping a tight hold on spending. And that's something that's going to be a big challenge for them because they don't have a huge amount of money to enact their policies. They're talking about wanting to promote economic growth to pay for a lot of this, but that's something which is not entirely within their control. So they're going to have to navigate a very difficult situation where they've raised expectations of change and of things improving without having necessarily the money to do an awful lot about it. So they're going to have to manage expectations. They're going to have to proceed carefully. But it's that economic discipline and the fact that they have been very keen not to promise too much that has, I think, been a difference to the previous leadership of the Labour Party when it was led, for example, by Jeremy Corbyn.
Dr. Fletcher, finally, what are your predictions of Keir Starmer's leadership as the Prime Minister? From the get-go, one can tell his stamina to rule.
Well, I think one thing that's very striking is that he's made a virtue of public service. He talks a lot about public service in his speech in Downing Street and also in his press conference today. And there is a sense, I think, that as much as any policy changes that he is intending to make, he wants his government, I think, to communicate a sense of propriety, of being a government that is well behaved, that observes the expected codes of behaviour of public servants. And that, I think, is a difference, as he would say, to how the Conservatives at times have acted. So there is this focus on standards in public life and on public service, which ran through his first public statements in Downing Street. And I think he'll be looking to actually make a very clear sign that this is a different type of government, one that is going to be respectable and respectful. And I think those are things that throughout all of the things they're going to be doing in these early days and weeks, they're going to try and mark the biggest change, which is from what's been, frankly, a fairly chaotic few years of the Conservatives into a calmer and perhaps more competent-looking government under Labour.
All right, I've been talking to Dr. Nigel Fletcher, who is a political analyst and commentator. Dr. Fletcher, thank you very much for your time and for talking to us today. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.